atheist. Is there a rub? How does this make you feel? Could we shut the door on her face because of what she's done in the past? Could we shut the door on your face because of what you've done in the past? You would shut the door on my face if you knew. If you knew. But Jesus says, my kingdom is wide open. Anybody can come.
Right.
Anybody can come. Okay, moving on. Verse 15. Jesus continues laying into these poor people, these rich people. You're hopeless. You religion scholars and Pharisees, you frauds, you posers. You go halfway around the world to make a convert. And once you get him, you make him into a replica of yourselves. Double damned. I like the way the NIV reads. It's actually the more accurate. He says, you travel over land and sea to win a single convert. And when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. Is Jesus using an angry verbal expletive here? You betcha. He is, because he's angry. These people find people to fit their mold of what a religious person looks like. And they disciple them in their ways. And they still forget about the homeless and the poor and the lepers and the people that really need God. It goes right back to the first woe. The second woe we're going to call corrupting converts. Corrupted converts. Now listen, I could go on probably for weeks and weeks about all the different various Christian heresies that are floating around the church today. Another time, another place, maybe you can invite me to lunch sometime and we'll talk about it. Okay? But there are Christian heresies, and there have been since the beginning. In the beginning, there were two big ones, which I'll tell you about now. One of them was, the disciples would go into a city, they'd make hundreds of converts, and then they'd leave to go to the next city, and behind them would come a group called the Judaizers. The Judaizers would say, good, I'm so glad that you're saved, that you've been baptized, but now, in order to be a real Christian, you have to become Jewish. We're going to circumcise you. What? Paul didn't say nothing. No! You read the letter to the Galatians, and you see what happened in the book of Acts, and Paul says, what? Who has bewitched you with this stuff? Your heart was circumcised when you believed. There was another group called the Gnostics. The Gnostics, of course, gnosis means knowledge. They believed that Jesus was really a phantasm. He was a ghost. He could not have been real flesh and blood because to them, flesh and blood is evil. And so Jesus could not have been real flesh and blood. He was a ghost. It was easy for him to resurrect because he was never really killed. The disciples would say, wait a minute, I was there. I saw them tear his back and his flesh was all ripped open. There was blood everywhere. He was real. And he really died and he really resurrected. We touched the wounds and we felt his flesh and bones. So, again, there are these kind of teachings. And how does that apply to us, Mark? Well, I'll tell you how it applies to us. Every now and then, we lead somebody to the Lord. Right? Then what? They accept salvation at work or at the gym, but did we invite them to church? Did we invite them to life groups? Because life groups at Crosspoint are awesome. Absolutely. That's where discipleship happens. It happens one-on-one. Start a study group at school. Start a study group at work. When you win somebody to the Lord, get them into the church because if you don't, somebody else will, and who knows what they're going to teach them. We want them to have sound doctrine so they can experience freedom with God, this with God, and this with us. Okay? Amen. All right, moving on. Did you feel a rub? By the way, you feel that? Okay. I did too. Stop, blink, and think. Circle it, come back to it later. Verse 16. I love this in the Message. Jesus says, you're hopeless. What arrogant stupidity. You say, if somebody makes a promise with his fingers crossed, that's nothing. But if he swears with his hand on the Bible, that's serious. Now, that's religious, isn't it? What ignorance. Does the leather on the Bible carry more weight than the skin on your hands? What about this piece of trivia? If you shake hands on a promise, that's nothing. But if you raise your hand that God is your witness, now that's serious. What ridiculous hair splitting. What difference does it make whether you shake hands or raise hands? A promise is a promise. What difference does it make if you make your promise inside or outside a house of worship? A promise is a promise. God is present, watching and holding you to account regardless. One, number 3, we're going to call superficial promises. Superficial promises. Let me ask you something. Are you good at follow-through? I'm not. My wife is, so that's okay. I like to start stuff. I'm like an activator. I like to start things, but I have a hard time following through. I just get bored or I get tired. Maybe I'm just lazy. I don't know. But when people at work ask me to do something, can they really trust me to follow through on it? Or what about this? You've all experienced this. You let somebody borrow some money, and they say, great, man, I'll pay you back next week. Next week, I promise I'm going to pay you back. Every time you see them, I promise I'm going to pay you back. The more they promise, the less the odds are you're actually going to get that money back, right? The same thing here. Do you do good work at work? Do you do good work at school? When people think of you based on what you do, what do they think about you? You see, Jesus taught us to just do what you say you're going to do. And if you can't do it, then don't say yes to it. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. It's just that simple. Know what to say no to. That's what I love about Harv. He knows what to say no to. Love that. I want to be like that. They call us hypocrites because of this. Did you feel a rug? Okay, stop, blink a minute, and think. And circle it and come back to it later because we're moving on. Moving on. Verse 23. Verse 23. Jesus says, you're hopeless, you religion scholars and Pharisees, frauds, posers. You keep meticulous account books, tithing on every nickel and dime you get. But on the meat of God's law, things like fairness and compassion and commitment, the absolute basics, you carelessly take it or leave it. Careful bookkeeping is commendable, but the basics are required. Do you have any idea how silly you look writing a life story that's wrong from start to finish, nitpicking over commas and semicolons? This is my favorite one. This is my favorite woe, probably because this is the one I relate with the most, okay? I'll just be honest with you. The fourth woe we're going to call, you're so holy, you're no good. Otherwise known as, so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. That's right. Okay, I love the NIV also. The NIV, Jesus says, give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. Anybody have any mint or any cumin in their it's small, isn't it? Can you imagine measuring out a tenth of that? That would require some real meticulous measurement, wouldn't it? So Jesus says, look, you've got it right in the sense that you're so meticulous about your worship of God. That's good. But you missed the bigger picture. Justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. I hate it when people say that because I can't figure out what the latter and the former was. You know what I'm saying? So, then he says, you blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but then you swallow a camel. Okay, now I can understand that because you ever ridden a camel or seen one? They're nasty. Would you want to eat one of those? Nasty? No, yuck. A gnat, that's harder. That's because you ever gone jogging and hit that swarm and you get a gnat, you're on a bike ride. You can't help the gnat. I mean, you can help the camel, okay? Well, Jesus is actually kind of giving a release valve here in his thrashing of the Pharisees, okay? He's using a word play. You can see up there that in Hebrew, the word for gnat is kanapa. Everybody say kanapa. That was big. Say it again, kanapa. All right, now say camel. Camel is kamelon. Say kamelon. Kamelon, very good. All right, kanapa, kamelon, kanapa, kamelon. He's actually making a pun, a wordplay here. What Jesus actually says sounds something silly like this. He says, look, you guys are very meticulous about your worship of God in the sense of tithing, but you missed the bigger picture. You missed the bigger picture of mercy and justice and faithfulness. And then you kanapa, kamelon. You kanapa, kamelon. He's like your mouth's full of marbles, Jesus. Can't really understand you. But they got it. What they got out of this was this. Let's see if you can relate. First of all, Christianity is not a self-help religion. People really think that you come to church to get cleaned up and become a better person. That happens, but that's not what it's all about. What these people were doing is they were trying to make themselves very holy. I mean, the whole thing about straining out a gnat was real.